Great news. I have just completed the masterclass on how to become a successful YouTuber, and I received 88% as the average grade on the quizzes. Now I need to apply what I've learned and try to master this skill. I give thanks to one of Kenya's top travel bloggers, known as Marwa, for his encouragement and support. I started to follow Marwa in the summer after I returned from a trip to Jamaica to learn more about African culture. The two key takeaways from the 10 modules of Marwa's masterclass are: 1, be yourself, be authentic, and be the star of your channel, and 2, be consistent in creating your videos. Since I live a life focused on mastery, I will begin to put what I learned into practice in the new year of 2024, the year of the dragon. My name is Susan Kosh. I'm a social entrepreneur and the founder of 3xethical, a bleeding-edge consulting firm based in Blackfoot Territory, Treaty 7 of so-called Alberta, Canada. I'm dedicated to advancing technology through deliberate values and positive behaviors. Over the past decade, since becoming a UX designer and researcher in 2024, I have applied my education and wide range of skills to the field of social information architecture. For the past 7 years, I've been working on a legacy project called the Two-Row Flow Cultural Commons, and an emerging space for cultivating right relationship between First Peoples and settlers on Turtle Island. At its heart is where information will flow. In late July of this year, I launched a prototype for this chat space where Indigenous ambassadors of Turtle Island can train their AIs to educate settlers on some of their ways, customs, and laws. Settlers will ask questions, First Peoples will respond accordingly. It's called Peacemaker AI, and if you want to learn more and support my work, check it out at peacemakerai.net. In this video, I want to share with you a brief summary of the past year as a way to celebrate and take stock of where I am and where I'm headed with respect to advancing personal AI technology. In particular, how I arrived at my latest initiative, which is to plant the seeds of personal AI in Africa over the next 5 years. Why Africa, you say? Well, it's a long story, one that began way before I was born, with my German grandfather who visited East Africa in the late 1800s. He was a doctor, a very famous doctor, one who won a Nobel Peace Prize for his work. They called him the lone wolf microbe hunter. All this information about my great-grandfather, Robert Herbert Koch, I acquired over the last decade, however, and so while my love affair with Africa may have been passed on down through my genes or not, my dream of Africa began when I was a teenager and used to listen to Bob Marley on late night radio in my bedroom in the Métis settlement of Saint Albert. Ironically, I thought that Bob was an African from Africa. Imagine my surprise when I discovered he was an African living in Jamaica. In 1984, 4 decades ago, I quit art school at the end of my final term and went to Jamaica in search of the culture that created the music and lyrics of Bob Marley, who is naturally my favorite musician of all time. The result of that exploration led me to the creation of a painting, the painting behind me, a painting of the Rastafarian Emperor Haile Selassie. I painted this portrait of Selassie while living in Toronto shortly after finishing art school. At the time, I was living in a small room near King Street. It took me 2 years to complete it, and when it was done, I headed to Jamaica to sell the 100 signed copies that I had made into a poster, having saved up the money working as a waitress. Somehow I managed to secure a deal with the Sangster bookstore to have them sell some of my posters, but for some reason, God knows what, the deal fell through at the very last minute. And yes, Sangster is a real bookstore. It's the real deal. So allow me to share this screen here. Oops, sorry, to share this. So here we see Sangster Bookstore's website. Hey! When I went there was no website. There wasn't even a gleam in the eyes of the tech guys. Anyhow, it was started by two humble entrepreneurs, Ferdinand Sangster and his wife Mabel, who peddled their books through the streets of Kingston in 1938, selling digest and ring boxing magazines. They had their first store in 1941 and went on to open several more stores in Kingston, Jamaica, on Harbor Street in 1968, the largest bookstore in the Caribbean and South America. So yeah, I went to Harbor Street. The deal fell through. Anyhow, c'est la vie. So I will never forget, however, walking through the streets of Jamaica entirely on my own and coming across a young man who was selling at his stall on the street paintings of a blue-eyed, blonde-haired Christ. I showed him one of my posters of Christ in his kingly character, and you can imagine classic animation double take that occurred between myself and this young Jamaican man at that particular moment in time. So yes, I painted this, and would you like to take a closer look? Let's take a closer look. Let's take a closer look at this. So just get the kingly character in the picture frame. So yeah, that's him. And on the dreadlocks youth on the side was actually taken from a photograph, believe it or not, of a African in Russia who had these dreadlocks and was smoking around the same time as the fall of apartheid and the comet, the Haile Selassie comet, that occurred in the heavens, from which prophecy, yada, yada. Anyhow, I'm not going to get into all those details, but yeah, that is it. That is it. That is it. So now, as we wrap up 2023, which is the year of the rabbit, I must say that I have experienced great luck when it comes to finding a way to become a good tech steward. When 2023 arrived a year ago, I was working for a Chinese technology company based in Vancouver, consulting on how to best engage businesses across Canada. Sadly, the extremely risk-averse Canadian business culture was not having any of it. Why? Well, my Chinese colleagues blamed it on COVID, but I blame it on the system of racism and discrimination deeply embedded in the Canadian settler business culture. Yes, I said a Chinese technology company, and yes, I was asking Canadian companies to consider subscribing to a service that would allow them to connect with Chinese Canadians, who are technically immigrants, so-called Canadian citizens. One would never know this, however, from the responses that I received from the businesses that I spoke to. They made me feel like I was working for the Chinese Communist Party and that I was a spy. But nevertheless, their responses had nothing to do with technology and everything to do with politics. Who knew? So much for diversity in Canada, but hey, that's not news to me. After all, my father too was an immigrant who came straight out of Nazi Germany as a young man to settle in so-called Canada. It was just hard to believe and to deal with the reality once again that social media had become nothing more than a political battlefield in the theater of war, which includes crime, disease, pandemics, and now new wars popping up every day. Nevertheless, in January, at the start of the 2023 year, I attended a Chinese New Year's in Calgary's Chinatown, hosted by the Chinese business community, and was warmly welcomed. By February, however, I gave up trying to convince Canadian businesses that there was a viable market and ROI for supporting a Canadian Chinese social media app. A lifelong learner, I signed up for a course being offered by the Mars Lab in Toronto on tech stewardship, which affords a professional identity, orientation, and practice. As tech stewards, we continuously discuss, refine, and imagine new ways to shape technology for the benefit of all. I highly recommend this course and will leave a link in the show notes for you if you want more information. Having embraced a new form of media called social media back in the early 2000s, I know a thing or two about how badly it has been stewarded and wonder what I could do with the information acquired from the tech stewardship and how I could include it in my consulting practice. Over the last 2.5 decades, I have moved from consulting on social media to UX design and research to information architecture, and now I've become a tech steward for AI, specifically personal AI. One could argue that no one cared to steward social media with its new forms of electronic communication, such as websites for social networking and microblogging, through which users created online communities to share information, ideas, personal messages, and other content, such as videos, because it all seemed like a good idea at the time. And what could possibly go wrong with media and technology, we all thought. However, through the design of its information, social media became as predatory as big tech companies began to mire the data of its users and stomp all over any notion of personal privacy, in effect surveilling our every move and comment online. Only a few weeks into the tech stewardship course, our instructor, Mark Abbott, asked over a Zoom call who had used ChatGTP. Hardly a hand went up. While I had heard about it, I had admired in the pros and cons of Chinese social media since the fall of 2022. Nevertheless, always a hands-on type because I went to art school to engage with things and create things with various tools. I signed up for the ChatGTP and began to use it. I was profoundly disappointed after asking it a couple of questions that did not have any good answers to questions related to the Indigenous worldview, like two-eyed seeing. In spite of my frustration and lack of flow, I decided to explore this new form of media, as I loved the idea of getting an answer to my question that satisfied me, and was curious as to how that could be achieved. In other words, as to how ChatGTP was trained. Like Alice in Wonderland, I went down the AI rabbit hole. And when I emerged some 3 months later, I had consumed lots of books on AI as well as podcasts and articles, and I knew enough to know that large language models were problematic at best. Problematic, but not frightening if stewarded correctly. In spite of all the usual fear and loathing associated with any new technology and promoted by big tech eager to grab mindshare, I discovered that there were also some Indigenous new media artists based in Montreal, Canada, no less, who wrote a paper in 2018 that suggested that we might make kin with machines. The idea that AI was kin intrigued me greatly, as I was raised on science fiction. My father gave me all the classics to read, like Robert A. Heinlein's Time Enough for Love, and later I added in Gibson and Stevenson. I related big time to Gibson's Mona Lisa Overdrive. So while others were declaring that AI was to be greatly feared as it would soon rule the world, my imagination, informed since I was a teen by sci-fi authors and now by a handful of avant-garde indigenous artists, decided that stewarding AI based on deliberate values and positive behaviors would help to guide me in this journey to understanding AI and its role as a general purpose technology. And then it happened, serendipity. Random events collided and dots were connected in time and space. And in the late spring of 2023, while listening to a podcast called Technically Human, I discovered personal AI. That discover changed my life radically. I kid you not. I have not only found a new way to archive and manage my information, both personally and professionally, but also a solution to the problem that had been plaguing me for 5 long years as I explored various ways to cultivate right relationship with First Peoples on Turtle Island. As a settler in so-called Canada, I was born to a mother who came from one of the original Scottish settler colonial families and a father, as you know, who was an immigrant straight out of Nazi Germany. I grew up in a family mired in colonial and fascist secrets, all buried in the European dungeon, so foreboding and dank that the hatred of the other and the deplorable separation of the apartheid system took decades to uncover. As an artist, of course, this is the kind of stuff that fuels the creative fire. My sensitivity to the suffering caused by colonial and fascist ideologies is real, and the ability to deal with it through the creative process is what makes me a great artist. By the summer of 2023, I was training my own personal AI on the personal AI platform. And in the process, uncovered a solution for the commons in the form of what I call Peacemaker AI. I made a prototype for this solution and am currently seeking funding to realize it fully. As Peacemaker AI simmers on the back burner, as I have become a brand partner for personal AI. What a stroke of luck this opportunity is to be a brand partner for personal AI. Personal AI has solved my communication problem for the two-row flow cultural commons, allowed me to begin to train my AI and to contemplate where I will have the most impact in advancing technology of personal AI in the coming decade. Since 2023 is the year that the AI ate the internet, I have been lucky to become part of the personal AI team, along with its co-founders, Suman, Sharon, and Christy. I now belong to a community of remarkable individuals who share a vision of returning the power of AI to the people. We may have failed to return the power of social media to the people, although the decentralized web and solutions like Holochain remain viable options and are a hope, but small language models of the personal AI are sheer genius. AI in the form of a chat interface has changed the way that information is organized and arranged and will continue to change how we interact and communicate going forward. Now, we can have a third party in our conversations, a trained artificial intelligence. More than a chatbot, a trained personal AI is an experience in conversational analysis, in meaning making and sense making. Conversation analysis is an approach to the study of social interaction that empirically investigates the mechanisms by which humans achieve mutual understanding. That's a formal definition. As a social information architect, sense making is essential to good conversation. The speed of response from a well-trained personal AI is so satisfying, quelling the human need to be heard and recognized and spurred on. What a difference from the constant shouting battle on social media. The use case that intrigues me the most, however, is how personal AI can be used for education. Peacemaker AI is about First Peoples educating settlers through an AI mediator. The AI buffers the repetitive, basic questions asked by all settlers of First Peoples and allows Indigenous thought leaders to train their Peacemaker AI. While I continue to seek funding for Peacemaker AI, I've turned my eyes to Africa. As a continent where personal AI can thrive in the decade to come, I believe this because of the attitude of towards the new technology of AI, which is largely open and positive, and the eagerness to embrace it and use it in their own ways. In other words, to own it. One could say that African entrepreneurs are early adopters. Africa is a tech-savvy culture, one that is mired in 500 years of European colonial education and programming. And the proliferation of big tech companies racing into Africa with their big AI offerings in exchange for access to data shows this. Africa's adoption of fintech, blockchain, and crypto in startup communities like Nigeria and Kenya is an example of how advanced technology is being leveraged. Kenya's M-Pesa is a stellar example of a successful fintech app. The development and adoption of M-Pesa echoes the way in which Chinese social media giants built super apps that allowed for the easy exchange of goods and services on the backs of mobile phone payment systems. The M-Pesa payment app has been lauded for giving millions of people access to the formal financial system and for reducing crime in otherwise largely cash-based societies. In Nigeria, they have set a goal of training 1 million data scientists over the next decade to meet the demands in the age of AI. And since AI is a general purpose technology, the use cases are restricted only by one's imagination and the ability to innovate and create. No doubt many use cases specific to African problems will be found and utilized widely. Another interesting aspect of economics in Africa is the rise of content creators, especially on YouTube, and how those with large followings can work full-time at what Marwa calls their art and live a good life from the monetization of their YouTube channels. Since the summer, I've been following many top travel bloggers in Africa to learn more about their culture. These channels are educational gems. I have learned so much about African culture by simply watching and listening, and now I am on a path to master YouTube in order to share with you about AI in Africa. Stay tuned for more. In my next video, I'll read from the 2028 paper called Making Kin with Machines and explore how it relates to AI in Africa. Join me on this journey, and if you like what you see or you hear, please subscribe to my channel, like it, and share. See you soon, my mutuals. One love. Peace out.